System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' inner city left.
This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Today is Friday, July 4th.
Freedom Day. Don't you feel free? I bet you do.
I'm Amit TMK. Alongside Emoja Lil Tanky Sumler. Turns up, I see, for Freedom Day. Guys, we are free. Yay. We don't have to worry about alligator Alcatraz, or we don't have to worry about Guantanamo Bay, or how about this? Have you heard this one? That they're dumping people in the river. They're not even taking them to these black sites. Anyway, I won't even get involved with that. But yes, we paying attention to this scary stuff out there.
It'd all be different if only we voted for the Indian girl.
Kamala Harris, she
sometimes tries to identify as black.
She's half. Yeah, well. Okay, all right. But yes, here we are in the same damn place we were last year with Russia and Ukraine. That was the whole thing, right? It was going to be, we'll step in office. I'm going to step in the office and I'm going to stop the war right now. I'm going to stop the war, all this other stuff. And okay, so that's not happening. The war is continuing to rage. So there was a call, supposedly call between President Vladimir Putin and President Donnie J.
Do you want to be Donnie J? Can I be Trump? Can I be Putin?
I'm not role playing. I'm not role playing with you, and I will never be Donald Trump even in a role playing situation unless I'm the one that brings it up momentarily. But anyway, I do want to. Okay, this to me is the big deal. I'm going to show this to you. I'm going to let you react, and if you want to talk like Vladimir Putin with a Russian accent, or do the Donnie J impersonation, I'm totally fine with that. But I just want to show this, okay? For the podcast listeners, this is an article here. I believe this is from the New York Times. Russia pummels Kiev with drones and missiles after Putin-Trump call. After his call with Putin, Trump said he did not think the Russian leader wanted a ceasefire or an end to the 3-year-old conflict. Can you kind of give us, we haven't talked about this in a while, can you kind of give us, and your thoughts on this attack, and also kind of what's been happening in the Russian-Ukraine conflict? Special military operation, we should say.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, if Vietnam was a conflict, okay, Ukraine can certainly be a special military operation. And there's a reason why we use these cute little terms, right? Because no matter what you want to think, the United States did not use the full extent of its force against the Viet Cong. They never felt like they would have to, right? There was a time they perhaps could have, right? But the whole thing was, well, it's not going to be that big a deal. It's not going to be that big a deal. So they, slid in some military advisors, and it was like, it's going to be a little bit bigger deal than that. And they kept moving it up. But they never faced the full weight of the American military. And you know this because, I don't know if they're Vietnamese people. The United States didn't use nuclear weapons. You know what I'm saying? There's certain little telltale clues that give away that it wasn't a full-scale war. Ukraine is much the same way, right? Russia has never used the full weight of their army, of their military power. Just over the past 6 months, 280,000 Russians signed up for the military. That's probably a bigger military than Ukraine has in totality right now. Totality. But I think what's been really interesting over they claimed that it was a stalemate for a while, that no one was really gaining one way or the other, even though, the Russian military has continued to push ever forward towards, solidifying the regional integrity of the Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia region, all of those areas, right? I think they saw how conservative even the Russians had been, right? I think this is what the Iranian conflict with Israel really demonstrated. They saw the Iranian missile usage and they were like, we have been given way too much respect to American air defense. And over the past I don't know, week or two, they've really turned it up. That was a thing, and this has been warned for quite some time for all of the people that want to cry about, what's happening in Ukraine, which why would you do that? These are literal Nazis, not a metaphor. Trump has been very straightforward about the fact that he would be diverting his military resources away from that region to other conflicts. I mean, he campaigned on that. He wasn't able to make it end in one day because, America can't take that kind of an ego loss. If America pulled all of its intelligence resources, the fact that they have the drones, MQ-9s over the Black Sea, providing, targeting information, all of that, up to and including mercenaries that aren't officially with NATO or the United States, military hardware and equipment, right? The Ukrainian army would fold like a sheet. Like, that's just a reality. And they're seeing that now, right? Now that the Americans have to rebuild Fortress Israel, they don't even have time to play with this anymore. All of the resources have been diverted to Israel, as Trump has been telling Zelensky he was going to do all along. He's given him, and this is the thing you have to say, he's actually given Zelensky way more time to show something to the Americans than I thought he would. I really didn't think he would even give him 5 months, but now that, push comes to shove, the thing that people don't want to acknowledge is no matter how much money you spend on the military, there's only so much you can get out of it. It's an upper limit to what is achievable because America is not a manufacturing superpower anymore. You know what I'm saying? They're just not. And so no matter how much money you put into that, you're not getting more products out of it. You're not even necessarily getting the products faster or better. It's just the shares of the American military industrial complex continue to look good. So, yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting to me because, I think I remember when the whole thing with Mohammed bin Salman, where he was coming to power and then was, hey, everybody, we're going to allow women to drive. We're going to have movie theaters, Marvel films, all this good stuff. And he was so excited. He thought that was going to turn the tide and that was going to be it. But the Western culture, Western movies, all that Hollywood vibe, it's not the same pull that it was, in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. It's fallen off. You can say that about the music industry, or you could just say that other industries, other art and world, movies, all those other things just got better, So I think also, and you mentioned this too, why was Russia giving so much respect to the United States when obviously they are being disingenuous with everything that they do? They're setting up terrorist operations like the Opera House Theater. There's been several other operations. Civilians are dying. We saw this in Yemen with the United States. Civilians are dying. This is just what happens. This is what the United States does. And you got to think to yourself, why wouldn't they think that? Well, no one wants to acknowledge truly how violent and oppressive the United States is, and that they truly are willing to go to war with Iran and Russia and, coup whoever we want, go to war with China. They really are crazy enough to go do this. And I think people are now starting to see that. Speaking of crazy and crazy things that are said and done, we used to have all kind of names. Remember, we had cute names for Donnie J back then. It was like you had a Cheeto Mussolini, and you got the
Air Cheeto.
Air Cheeto. We don't really even do that anymore. It's just, why even joke? This guy is a joke. He is a joke. So I want to play this to you. I'm gonna let you react, and we can just kind of keep it going here. So this Donnie J, your president, not mine. I certainly. Didn't vote for him. But here we are. This was yesterday. You can see what he's on. All right, here we go.
Speaking to President Zelensky tomorrow, early in the morning. And, I'm very disappointed with the conversation I had today with President Putin, because I don't think he's there. And I'm very disappointed. Well, it's not. I'm just saying, I don't think he's looking to stop, and that's too bad. This is Biden. This isn't me. This is Biden's war. It wouldn't have happened if I were president. It wouldn't have happened. So, I in one way, I had to get too involved because it's Biden's war. And I got stuck in the middle of it, just like I did with immigration and a lot of other things that they screwed up. But
Yeah. Let's get the tanky reaction.
Oh my, he got stuck. You know what made you run for president, bro? I mean, you're a billionaire, man. You could have kept doing the wild shit.
These things were going to be some of the things you were going to have to deal with.
And he's still speaking only in his traditional 5% truth. You know what I'm saying? This is Biden's war. That's not true. You provided military support to Ukraine, to a nascently couped Ukraine. Everybody likes to talk about, Ukraine, the country goes back to the 90s, which first off is not that old, but that's not true. The Ukraine, as we understand it, really began in about 2014. You know what I'm saying? That was when the American State Department went there and couped the democratically elected government. That's when Victoria Nuland was caught on her hot mic saying, fuck the EU, because everyone knew this would break Europe. They knew that Europe couldn't afford to really go to war with Russia, and they knew the war was inevitable. So it's really more important when you talk about how old is Kiev to really talk about, starting with the new date of 2014. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sorry, but President Trump was president at a time between 2014 and today. And you provided them with military support. And I think you understand the implications of that. I say again, no one would have any doubts what it meant if she was providing military support to Puerto Rico, right? Or Guam. I didn't start the war. I just gave them, lethal military munitions and winked and nodded like, fuck them. What they gonna do? They ain't gonna do. We got your back. But also, even for today, he could stop it now by simply ceasing to provide intelligence, which, they've turned the munitions spigot off. And this is how Russia's really, really utilizes. I hinted a little bit about it when I was talking about Russia. It sees that they've been too conservative in this conflict, and that they've given too much respect to American military technology. They've increased their missile strikes deep into Kiev and to Lviv, and even as far as so far into Ukraine that sometimes like Poland has had to scramble fighters because they didn't know if the missile, you know what I'm saying, was going to cross over into the space. Not that they would have been able to do anything about it. But the thing is, over the past 3 weeks, what the Russians have been doing has been two things. Since they know that the Americans are no longer providing the level of munition support, weapon support that they have been over the past 3 years, right? The Russians have been hitting their ammo depots. It's like, not only are you not getting more, we're blowing up the shit that you got. The other thing that's been a big, huge strike increase over the past 3 weeks is they've been hitting recruitment centers. And the Ukrainians themselves are applauding this because the Ukrainians, by and large, don't want this war to continue. The ones that wanted war with Russia are already dead. Those people, those first guys that hoorah'd up and went and joined the military and I'll defend Ukraine, those guys died, The last body exchange between Russia and Ukraine. Again, that doesn't mean necessarily this is what the kill rate is, but it's as good a ratio as you can use as any other thing, was 75-1. Dead body return, dead body exchange. 75 Ukrainians, to 1 Russian dead body. And I think about the report that got leaked under Biden maybe a year or two before the election, where, the guy, the conscientious objector in the military, leaked the papers, and even then it was showing it was 12-1 kill rate, 12 Ukrainians getting killed for every 1 Russian. So we can presume that it's gotten much worse since then. And to me, it looks like Ukraine is on their last legs. It's up to the EU to defend Ukraine, and they're not a militaristic culture. They like to kill people, don't get me wrong, right? But they don't have that macho toughness, right? That's what the government does. That's not necessarily what the people do. And the people are the ones that fight wars, right? When you look at Russian men, I think about Dagestan, where them boys are training in fight clubs since 5 years old, 8 years old. They coming out Habib Nurmagomedov and Islam Makhachev. You know what I'm saying? Like over and over. That is the Russian masculine mentality right now. Americans, Westerners, we want to be fine arts. We want to be STEM. We want to be rich. Okay, that's what we want, or we want to be celebrities. We want to be stars. It's not to say there are not tough Americans. It's not to say there are not tough Europeans, but that's not the culture. They don't have a culture of toughness the way the Russians do. And the Europeans have it far, far less than the Americans. You know what I'm saying? Like you go to Texas and them boys are still tough. You go to Boston, them boys still tough. That may not be the overall American cultural attitude, but you get those subsets. You know what I'm saying? In Europe, where is that? I mean, Poland, right? All of the places that used to be Eastern Bloc. Those are the only places with a culture of toughness. You don't think about French men as, a culture of toughness. You don't think about British men as a culture of toughness, and that's just the reality. And that's what they're up against. And that's why the Russians have no fear, because they know the only thing they had a little bit of fear of is we don't want to push to all out World War III with the Americans and everything that entails. But war with the EU, when America is occupied with other stuff like Iran and trying to get ready for China, Russia licks its chops at that. Russia has had to fight the combined weight of the Europeans several times. Several times in history. They just see this as like five families, mafia shit. Like every now and again, we just gotta bleed Europe because they don't know to leave us the fuck alone, And I think that the Russian culture is far more on board because they see it as existential, whereas that is not the desire, I think, of most people that are in France. Most of the people that are in Germany, most of the people that are in Britain, you know what I'm saying? That's not most Dutch people. They don't wake up like, oh, we have to fight the Russians. The government's position is very different from the people's position. And that's an inherent disadvantage when you're looking at a war.
You mentioned this, and I wanted to kind of speak on it a little bit more. The U.S. says that they are going to be halting some of these deliveries to Ukraine. And I know you're mentioning that this is why that Europe is kind of picking up that torch, I guess, if you will. So Ursula von der Leyen. Okay.
Good luck.
Yeah. So like you said, I mean, essentially, what do they mean when they say the U.S. is halting deliveries to Ukraine? And, we've heard that they might be being directed to Israel, other things. I mean, can you kind of speak to what's happening with that and where these weapons may be going if they're not going to Ukraine?
After it became obvious that the Democrats were going to lose the last election, Joe Biden used his last 3 brain cells to try to come up with something with all the Europeans that would make the war, as they called it, Trump-proof. And they went and earmarked all these weapons, all of this money support, and they set it aside and they rushed it through Congress and they had it, and they've been just, slowly eking it out to the the Ukrainians, as time has went by. Most of it has been stored in NATO places, like Poland, places close to the border, so they can get it in and across the borders really fast. And that's another thing the Russians have been hitting is the logistics lines. They've been fucking up the trains, which I don't know why they hadn't been doing that for the past 3 years. You know what I'm saying? Since they knew that was how all the logistics were moving. But what's happened with that is, again, with the debacle of Israel's performance, right? Now they're earmarking all of that was set aside for Ukraine. They're stopping it and they're sending it all to Israel, which should tell you, by the way, this is not a truce. Or at best, it's a truce. It's not a ceasefire. You know what I'm saying? At best, it's a temporary truce. people are rearming and they're getting ready to make their own moves. And it's not like Iran is sitting still either. There are all kind of reports that, the Iranian foreign minister has been and the defense minister has been tearing up them streets in Beijing, trying to buy some J-10s, looking to repeat the performance that the Pakistani Air Force had against the Indian Air Force. And we'll see. We'll see. The big loser in all of that, ironically, is Russia. Russia has played a really kind of a cute game with Iran for really all the way back to the Bush years. You know what I'm saying? The Iranians have been trying to buy air defense, the S-300 system from the Russians, and, they got sanctioned by the United Nations, and Russia used that as an opportunity to not follow through on that in order to stay in compliance with the United Nations mandates, but they kept the fucking money. You know what I'm saying? And so over the past 20 years, there's been this dance, where the Iranians are trying to buy the the Su-32s from Russia to get, to update their Air Force. And there's just been delay after delay after delay. And it looks like Iran is making a break with Russia in this way. They're acting like it's one big happy breaks, and maybe it is, but it looks like the Russian defense industries stand to lose billions from the games that they played about slow rolling this money. And look, who knows, man? Russia has always had a really complicated relationship with Israel. We've talked about it on the show before. 1/10 of the population of Israel comes from Russia. You know what I'm saying? Who knows? Who knows why they've done it? But for years, Russia has never really made good on their obligations to Iran contractually as far as defense spending has went. And so now it looks like the Iranians are aligning with the Chinese in this way. Again, these are all rumors. And even if they were to strike the deals right now, as I said, with the Russians, these things take time. You don't go there with $100 billion and buy 40 J-10s and then all of your people. Think about right now, the average listener. If someone was to come to you and give you a Ferrari, could you drive it to work? Not at all. Because you don't know how to deal with a vehicle like that, even if you know how to drive, right? Now think about a plane, a fighter plane, right? How much more intricate it is, the new age systems, possibly moving from being a 4th generation fighter to a 5th generation fighter, right? It takes time to make these kind of rollouts, and so even if all of that happened tomorrow, there's no guarantee that the Iranian Air Force will be back up to its power. I don't know, maybe in a year even, and they definitely don't have a year. There's no way Israel will let this last on for a year. I mean, you guys heard this on Inner City Left First. If you didn't already know, the war is coming back. The Israeli-Iranian war is coming back as soon as they feel like Israel has stocked up to the level that they can to achieve the mission. There's even talk that the Americans are going to sell the Israelis B-2s, which is a very complicated feeling because that's the one fighter, that's the stealth bomber, the one that most people think about when you think about stealth. And America's never sold those to anybody. When they did the attack on Iran, the Iranian Fordo, right, they used the B-2. And that's, I guess, the expectation of the Israelis. Well, if you give it to us, we'll finish the job. And like I said, even if you're a great F-35 pilot, there's no guarantee you can step into a B-2 and just fly that thing beautifully tomorrow because you're a pilot, right? So both of these countries have the same issues, and it is a race. And America's got all their horses in on Israel. And Ukraine is left to fend for it. It's whatever they can develop internally. And whatever the Europeans can manufacture and get to them. Because, again, it's not even a matter anymore of Europeans giving them financing. It's not about money. These materials do not exist. And the ones that do not exist for export to Ukraine. They're all going to Israel.
Seems like a really important moment in human history right now. So many pieces at play. Obviously, Iran and Israel is a big one. But like you said, the BRICS is what is BRICS? BRICS Summit is happening right now. It's kind of feels like this pivotal moment of, is BRICS going to either maybe shave off some other members of BRICS, come together as a squad, really, really tighten up? Or are they going to kind of unravel, which is something that the president of America, Donald Trump, said. He wanted to end this BRICS thing. Can you talk just a little bit? Maybe that's the last thing we'll discuss, sort of BRICS summit coming up. And, what is the future for BRICS?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think the next year is going to be a pivotal year for BRICS because it's really going to determine, again, what their identity is going to be. The thing about American dirty tricks and Western dirty tricks is the world is watching. So they're always seeing these things. Trump is saying outright, I want to have a divorce between Russia and China. He's saying outright, I want to destroy the BRICS from the inside. BRICS already has several countries that are deeply tenuous, right? They have relations with Saudi Arabia. They're not a full-fledged member state, but they have, they're part of the organization. You can't trust the Saudis. That's to say nothing of Turkey. Turkey's part of BRICS, right? So they're infiltrated in a major way from the inside. India and where BRICS is being hosted right now, Brazil, right? So if you would have asked me 3 years ago, who are the core BRICS people that we know we can count on, I definitely would have said Brazil, South Africa, China. I would have said Russia. I'm less certain about Brazil now. And again, this is something Dr. CB has talked about. Lula is a little bit slippery, and it showed last year when he used his veto to keep Venezuela from joining the BRICS, against the recommendation of both China and Russia, right? So the fact that BRICS is happening right now in Brazil and Xi is not there, Putin is not there, they both gave reasons, but at the end of the day, they go where they want to go and they're not there. Not even is the second person in charge in China there, right? Because Wang Yi is in Europe right now negotiating trade deals. So you have the third-ranked Chinese, government official over at BRICS. And it shows me that, this in Asian terms, this is some real cold shoulder, right? They're very subtle in how they chide and reprimand. They're very different from Americans. They don't make bombastic statements and, declare we're going to war with you and, we'll never do business with you again. That's not how China does. They slowly move back. And it's hard to not see this as a little bit of that, and so these represent real challenges for BRICS. I think that Lula has to see what's happening right here because this is you're being chided by two of the most important members of BRICS. Either he'll get more in line with where this is going, where the inevitable resolution of BRICS versus the G7, or he won't. And he will go closer to the American sphere. And gotta tell you, man, based on his actions over the past 2 years, it makes me think that he's getting closer to align with the American orbit, and that's dangerous. That's something I would have definitely expected from Bolsonaro. I would not have expected that from Lula. So,
yeah, now well said. I want to give a shout out to our podcast listeners. We're available everywhere you find podcasts, Apple Podcasts. Leave us a rating. Spotify, give us a little comment right there. Rate us as well. Patreon.com/InnerCityLeft. We want to give a huge shout out to our patrons. They all always holding us down. And yeah, I hope everyone has a good weekend on Freedom Day. Everyone's free. There's no problems. It's all good, everyone. Final things from you, Tanky? Anything we missed?
Freedom. Freedom ain't free. You got to pay your tax, you dumb son bitch. Okay, we're not
Freedom.
libertarians here. I want roads. I want libraries. I want, public infrastructure. Okay, pay your fucking taxes.
You will be paying every cent of your student loans because we need to send weapons to Israel. And you're being selfish. You're being selfish.
You are. These motherfuckers want to have Medicaid. No. If you were to have Medicaid, how is that person, from Lithuania who just became a full-fledged Israeli citizen, how are they going to get their health care? All you think about is your fucking self.
All you think about is yourself. if you were to receive Medicaid, no Ukrainian Nazi generals would have been able to have a Rolls Royce. Okay. For Emoji Little Tanky Summer, I'm Amin TNK. This is the Inner City Left broadcast. Peace.
System riding to the core. Yeah. Reppin' Inner City Left.